For more on this, we are now being joined by Josh Hastings, joining us live from Jerusalem in Israel. He is an Israeli journalist and West Asia correspondent for the Jewish News Syndicate. Welcome to WION, sir.
Thanks so much for having me.
First up, Syrian rebels have declared Damascus free. The fall of the Assad regime in Syria is now being viewed as the collapse of Iran's artifice. My question to you, how is all that is happening in Syria being viewed in Israel? What is Israel's position in the Syrian conflict so far?
So the saying goes, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And I don't think that's the case here in this reality, in this new situation. Of course, Assad, backed by Iran, backed by Russia for so many years, being a bastion of terrorism in the Middle East. But that being said, you now have uncertainty in terms of these Sunni rebels who have taken over right now, some of them backed by Turkey, of course. What will they do when it comes to Israel? Israel right now is bolstering its positions on the Golan Heights, which borders Syria. Reports this morning indicating that actually some Israeli tanks are going into a buffer zone between Israel and Syria via the Golan, which is the first time in 40 years. So it remains to be seen. All other reports indicate that Israel actually attacked a suspected Syrian chemical weapons facility over the last several days, because it could be extremely tumultuous if the rebels, in fact, get those weapons, if the rebels decide that they're going to turn their aggression on the state of Israel. It's something we have to pay attention to. In addition, over the weekend, Israel actually coming to the defense of a UN position which came under attack there along the Israeli-Syrian border. So Assad, even though he was in the Iranian orbit, even though Hezbollah, of course, aligned with Assad, Israel's been fighting Hezbollah, even though there's a ceasefire now, it remains to be seen what the future holds in between the realities which we saw this morning.
Right. I was just coming to the point you made there as to how Israel has said that it will not intervene in the internal conflict in Syria. And the IDF has, like you mentioned, it has strengthened its true presence along the Syrian border with Golan Heights. It has also warned not to turn in our direction. Do you sense a spillover of the war in Syria at this point of time?
Well, I really hope now, because you have to remember Israel just announced a ceasefire with Hezbollah just last week after over a year. At the same time, Israel remains in a war against Hamas in Gaza. So all of that is going on. Israel's fighting a war on 7 different fronts. It would be difficult to add an 8th front, the Syrian front, if in fact the rebels decided to turn their weapons on us. Right now, as you mentioned, Israel's decided that we are not going to back any horses in this race. We are not going to get involved in internal Syrian politics and internal Syrian matters. President Trump said the same thing as well. The United States would not be involved. We have enough on our plate right now. This was actually a very, very surprising that this happened so fast, that the rebels, I thought this would take maybe weeks or whatnot, and just a few days, if not a week, the rebels were able to take down the Assad regime there in Syria.
Mr. Hastings, do you think that Israel views Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the HTS group, which U.S. has designated as a terror organization, as perhaps dangerous to its interests in the region?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're talking about a group that at one point was recognized as the al-Qaeda over there in Syria. You have elements of the ISIS state, the Islamic State there in Syria as well. So again, we are being very, very cautious. Israel's Security Cabinet meeting last night and again today to discuss the ramifications of the rebel takeover. We hope that things remain quiet. Assad, of course, was not a friend of the state of Israel, siding with Hezbollah backed by Iran, but that was an enemy that we knew. Now we have essentially an enemy that we don't know. And if any of these groups get their hands on chemical or biological weapons or whatnot and turn their attention towards Israel, Israel is going to have to deal with this issue. We have so many things on our plate now. Primarily, we have to prevent Iran from going nuclear. That is the main focus. That's the next existential threat to the state of Israel. But at the same time, we cannot have any attacks from the Syrian border via the Golan Heights into Israel.
At this point of time, there's a lot that's happening in West Asia. Israel's war with Hamas in Gaza, the truce, the fragile truce between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. So the point of concern right now is that how will this takeover by the Syrian rebels might change the dynamics or the regional balance across West Asia?
No, absolutely. It absolutely could. On one hand, positive is that Iran has been very, very weakened as a result of Israel's strikes on Iran and, of course, their proxies, Hezbollah and Hamas down in Gaza. You know, these might be different sides here. You're talking about Shia, you're talking about Sunni, all these different parties, but at the end of the day, Iran is the head of the octopus, and that still remains our greatest threat. But as you said, we do have to pay attention to this new reality. We do have to take into consideration the fact that some of these Sunni-led groups in Syria perhaps will turn their attention towards us. We know that they're enemies of Iran, but they are not a friend of the state of Israel. You can make the argument that certain Kurdish groups who are Western-backed, backed by the United States, definitely have common interests with the state of Israel. But if you're talking about the HDS, if you're talking about the rebels there supported by the Turkish regime, they certainly don't have the interests of the state of Israel or the Western world on their minds. So we have to pay attention very, very carefully to the spiraling situation there in Syria.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Haston, for joining us from WION and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You.